Be me, Truitt, project manager with a good bit of experience under my belt. Not a rock star, not a slouch, just a guy who knows how to get things done. A while back, I was on the job hunt. Found this one tech company that seemed perfect. Cool projects, good reputation, paid well. The whole package. Felt like a place I could actually build a career. I polish my resume until it shines and send it in for a PM role. A few days later, I get a call for an interview. First round is with the technical lead for the department. We hit it off immediately. He asks sharp questions, I give solid answers. We talk strategy, past projects, how to handle difficult developers. The vibe is perfect. He's basically telling me the job is mine, says I'm the most qualified person he's spoken to. Just need to have a final chat with the new HR director, a woman named Amalia. He calls it a formality. I'm feeling good about it. The next day, I log into the video call for the final interview. Amalia joins the call. Instantly, the atmosphere shifts. She has this forced corporate smile plastered on her face. She barely glances at my resume on her screen. Doesn't ask about my experience, my qualifications, or my successes on previous projects. Instead, it's all vague, corporate speak questions. Asks me about my philosophy on workplace harmony. Wants to know how I would de-escalate friction caused by differing communication styles. I answer honestly, talking about clear goals, open communication, and focusing on the project. Her smile tightens a little. She then asks how I would ensure a safe space for all team members to feel heard. It feels less like a job interview and more like navigating a minefield of buzzwords. I try my best, talking about mutual respect and professionalism. The whole conversation is surreal. I don't think we mentioned the actual job once. The call ends with a chilly, "We'll be in touch." The next morning, a generic rejection email is sitting in my inbox. We've decided to pursue other candidates whose vision more closely aligns with our company culture. Vision? Culture? The tech lead basically hired me on the spot. I'm confused and pretty annoyed. Figure it's a fluke. Maybe they had an internal candidate. A month or so goes by. The same company posts another similar position. I apply again. Same process. I ace the technical interview with a different team lead. He's even more enthusiastic than the first one. He tells me they desperately need someone with my skill set. Then comes the final interview with Amalia. This time, it's even weirder. She asked me to describe a time I confronted unconscious bias in a team setting. I give a real example of smoothing over a misunderstanding between two developers from different cultures. She looks unimpressed. She talks a lot about the company's new initiative to empower marginalized voices in the tech space. The whole interview feels like she's already decided I'm not the right fit and is just going through the motions. The rejection email arrives even faster this time. Now I'm starting to get a picture. Something is off. I tell my friends about it. My two closest friends are Hank and Jaden. Hank is a tech wizard, the kind of guy who builds his own servers for fun and can code in his sleep. Jaden is the cynic, smart, brutally honest, and sees the patterns everyone else misses. We're all hanging out in a Discord call one night, just relaxing. I'm ranting about my job search, specifically about the weird rejections from this one company. Jaden is quiet for a minute, just listening. Then I hear him typing furiously. "Dude," he says, "pull up the LinkedIn page for this company. Click on People." I do it. Hank does too. Jaden tells me to filter by new hires over the last 6 months. The time frame matches up perfectly with when Amalia started as HR director. The results load. We all go silent. It's a wall of faces, all women, every single new hire. Not a single man in the bunch. We start clicking on the profiles. One of the new senior software engineers has a profile that lists her previous job as a social media manager for a makeup brand. Her skills section is full of things like content creation and brand engagement. Nothing about actual coding languages. Another new hire in data analytics has a degree in something completely unrelated, and her only experience is a 6-week online boot camp. It's blatant. Amalia isn't hiring the most qualified people. She's only hiring women. The feeling isn't just anger. It's this deep sense of frustration, that feeling of being judged and dismissed before you even get a chance to prove yourself. Jaden breaks the silence. He just laughs, this bitter, humorless sound. "You're an idiot, Truitt. he says, but there's no malice in it. You went in there as Truett. You should have applied as Ashley. You would have gotten the job, a signing bonus, and a welcome basket. It's a joke, but it hangs there in the digital air. Then Hank speaks up, his voice thoughtful. You know, it's not actually impossible. Jaden and I both stop. What do you mean? I ask. Hank starts talking. He gets this energy when he's on a technical problem. Real-time voice modulation is pretty advanced now. You can train it on a voice profile, and VTuber software uses real-time facial mapping. We could rig up a filter, a realistic one, not an anime cat girl. The joke was slowly morphing into a real, tangible idea. What if we did it? What if we created completely new, female personas and applied? It would be the perfect experiment. A way to prove, definitively, that the hiring process was a sham. The initial idea felt crazy, deceptive. But then I thought about those 2 rejections, the feeling of being dismissed for reasons that had nothing to do with my ability. The company was already being deceptive. They were pretending to care about finding the best talent while running an ideological screening process. Our plan wasn't about malice. It was about exposing a hidden truth. Jaden was all in. He loved the sheer chaos of it. I looked at Hank. He was already sketching out a system architecture. We decided to do it, all 3 of us. We'd create 3 separate, believable female candidates. We gave it a code name, Project Trojan Mare. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Hank went into what we called goblin mode. He locked himself in his room and built the system from the ground up. He didn't use off-the-shelf software. He said it was too detectable. He coded a custom video filter overlay that was subtle and realistic. It didn't look like a filter. It just looked like a different person. It softened jawlines, changed eye shapes just enough. The voice modulation was the hardest part. He had us record hours of ourselves speaking in a neutral tone, then fed it into a machine learning model. The result was 3 distinct, natural-sounding female voices. Not robotic, not high-pitched and fake, just believable. While Hank was building the tech, Jaden and I worked on the personas. We had to be meticulous. I became Ashley, a friendly, experienced project manager. My resume was my real resume, just with the name changed and some minor details altered. Hank, the coding genius, became Brenda, the quiet, hyper-competent developer. Her GitHub profile was Hank's actual GitHub, just anonymized. A portfolio of brilliant, complex projects that spoke for itself. Jaden, who had a knack for numbers, became Chloe, a sharp, no-nonsense data analyst. We used AI to generate realistic headshots, not supermodels. Just normal-looking women you'd see in any office. Plausible, forgettable even. We built their LinkedIn profiles, backdating posts and connections to make them look established. By the time we were done, Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe felt like real people. It was time to apply. We each submitted our applications for 3 different open roles that matched our skill sets. Then we waited. We didn't have to wait long. Less than 24 hours later, all 3 of us had emails in our new inboxes. It was Amalia. The tone was night and day compared to the automated rejections I was used to. She was enthusiastic, friendly, almost giddy. Dear Ashley, I was so impressed by your background. Dear Brenda, your portfolio is absolutely stellar. Dear Chloe, we're very excited about your application. She wanted to schedule interviews with all of us as soon as possible. The first test was passed. We were through the door. The interviews were surreal. We set up a command center in my apartment living room. 3 desks, 3 computers, all routed through Hank's central server that ran the disguise software. My interview as Ashley was first. I logged into the call. The filter kicked in. I looked at myself on the screen. It was unnerving, but it was flawless. Amalia joined the call, beaming. Ashley, so wonderful to meet you, she said. The voice modulator worked perfectly. The voice coming out of my speakers was calm, professional, and distinctly female. She didn't ask me a single difficult question. She gushed about my resume. She talked about how refreshing it was to see strong female leadership in the project management space. I just fed her the lines she wanted to hear, talked about collaborative environments, supportive teamwork, and empathetic leadership. It was like I had a cheat code. She told me she was passing me straight to the final round with the tech lead, Hank's interview as Brenda was even more absurd. The tech lead asked him a series of deeply complex coding questions. Hank, speaking as Brenda in a quiet, measured voice, solved them instantly. The tech lead was audibly impressed. You could hear him saying, "Wow," under his breath. When Hank met with Amalia, she barely spoke about his skills. She just talked about how brave it was for a woman to be so deeply involved in the male-dominated coding world. Jaden's interview as Chloe was the same story. He aced the technical portion, and Amalia treated him like a long-lost sister, complaining about how men always tried to over-explain data to her. Within a week, all three of us had job offers. Not just offers, fantastic offers. The salary they offered Ashley was 15% higher than the top of the range listed on the job posting I had originally applied for. The system wasn't just biased, it was financially rewarding that bias. We accepted the offers. Our first day was remote onboarding. We were introduced to the rest of the team on a massive group video call. Looking at the gallery of faces, it hit me. We were the only new hires, and seeing the rest of the team, it was clear Amalia had been busy for a while. The gender ratio was wildly skewed. Amalia led the call, and she was glowing. She introduced us, Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe, as her new dream team. She said we were here to shake things up and bring a fresh perspective. The first week was a masterclass in corporate dysfunction. The company's internal systems were a mess. Projects were disorganized. Communication was chaotic. It became very clear, very quickly, that many of the employees Amalia had hired were severely underqualified. In the main development chat, one of the senior developers hired, a month before us, asked a question about how to perform a basic Git command. The entire channel went silent for 5 minutes. Hank, as Brenda, eventually just messaged her the answer privately to end the awkwardness. Deadlines were treated as suggestions. People would promise to have work done by a certain day, and then that day would come and go with nothing but excuses. The whole place was a productivity black hole. But we had a job to do. We weren't there to slack off. As Ashley, I immediately started organizing the projects I was assigned. I built proper timelines, set clear milestones, and started hounding people for updates. Hank, as Brenda, started closing tickets that had been open for months. He rewrote entire chunks of buggy, inefficient code, massively improving performance on one of the key products. Jaden, as Chloe, built a data dashboard that gave the leadership team the first clear view of their user engagement they'd had in over a year. We weren't trying to be superstars. We were just doing our jobs to the standard we were used to. In that environment, just being competent made you look like a wizard. Amalia was ecstatic. She would constantly praise the three of us in public channels. "This is what happens when you empower women," she wrote after Hank fixed a server crashing bug. "Ashley is bringing so much needed order to this chaos. A natural leader," she posted after I delivered a project ahead of schedule. It was the most bizarre, ironic form of validation I had ever experienced. We were working from my apartment, headsets on, running our female personas, and being praised by the very person who had rejected us for not being women. We started documenting everything. Every chat message from Amalia praising us. Every email where she made a disparaging comment about male ego in the workplace. We recorded the all-hands meetings, where she would present diversity numbers that were completely misleading, framing the recent hiring spree as a success for equality rather than the result of her own biased agenda. We were building a case, piece by piece. The other women on the team, the ones Amalia had hired, started to resent us. We were making them look bad, just by being productive. They would turn in sloppy work, and I, as Ashley, would have to send it back with detailed notes on how to fix it. In team meetings, they would propose ideas that made no technical or logical sense, and Hank or Jaden, as Brenda and Chloe, would have to gently explain why they wouldn't work. They started forming their own little clique, excluding us from informal chats. They complained to Amalia that our standards were unrealistic and that we were creating a stressful environment. They said Brenda was cold and intimidating because she was so direct with her code reviews. They claimed Chloe was aggressive for pointing out flaws in their data analysis. Amalia's solution was to hold a women in the workplace support circle. Attendance was mandatory for all female employees. The three of us had to sit through an hour-long video call where several of our coworkers cried about how stressful the job was. Amalia looked at us with this pleading expression, telling us that we need to support our sisters and that sometimes empathy is more important than efficiency. She was asking us to lower our standards to accommodate the feelings of the incompetent people she had hired. The entire situation was spiraling into a vortex of absurdity. A few months into the job, a massive new project was announced. It was a complete overhaul of the company's main product. High stakes, tight deadline. The CEO himself announced it in an all-hands meeting. He made it clear that the future of the company was riding on this. After the call, Amalia set up a meeting with me, Hank, and Jaden's personas. She told us that she had successfully lobbied for the three of us to be the core leads on the project. Ashley, she said, you'll be the overall project lead. Brenda will lead development, and Chloe will handle all the data and analytics. The CEO wanted to put some of the old guard in charge, but I convinced him to trust my team. She was framing it as a massive victory for feminism. She had fought the patriarchy and won. In reality, she had just volunteered the only 3 competent people in her hiring pool for the most difficult project in the company's history. We knew this was it. This was the ultimate test. If we succeeded, we would prove our skills beyond any doubt. If we failed, the company could go under, and it would be our fault. The pressure was immense. But for us, it was also the perfect opportunity, the perfect stage to finally pull back the curtain. The project started with a bang. The three of us, in our new leadership roles, laid out a comprehensive plan. As Ashley, I broke the entire project down into manageable sprints. Clear goals, clear deadlines, no ambiguity. Hank, as Brenda, designed the new system architecture. It was clean, efficient, and scalable. A work of art, really. Jaden, as Chloe, set up tracking for every conceivable metric, so we could monitor progress in real time. We presented the plan to the upper management, minus the CEO. They were blown away. One of the senior VPs told us it was the most professional and well-thought-out project plan he'd seen in his 10 years at the company. Amalia was on the call, just beaming with pride. She saw our success as her success. The first couple of weeks were smooth. We were hitting all our targets. The parts of the project we controlled directly were flying. The problem was the other team members, the ones Amalia had hired. We had to delegate tasks to them. There was no way around it, and it was like throwing work into a void. Tasks that should have taken 2 days would be a week overdue. When the work was finally submitted, it was almost always unusable. The code was a mess, full of bugs, inefficient, completely ignoring the standards Hank had set. The project management updates were vague and useless. The data entry was riddled with errors. It was a constant battle. We were spending more time fixing their mistakes than doing our own work. I, as Ashley, tried to be the good manager. I'd schedule one-on-one calls to go over the work. I'd provide constructive feedback, detailed examples, even templates to follow. They would nod and smile and promise to do better. Then they'd turn around and make the exact same mistakes again. Hank had it the worst. As Brenda, he had to do code reviews. He would leave dozens of comments on a single submission, pointing out critical flaws. Instead of learning from the feedback, they got defensive. They started ganging up on him in the team channel, accused him of being nitpicky and unsupportive. One of them told him that perfect is the enemy of good, as an excuse for submitting code that literally wouldn't compile. Jaden's life wasn't much better. He'd ask for specific data sets, and they'd send him spreadsheets that were formatted incorrectly, with numbers that were obviously wrong. When he'd point it out, they'd act like he was the one being difficult. The project started to slow down. The green progress bars on our timeline started turning yellow, then red. We were working 14-hour days just to keep things from completely falling apart. The three of us would finish our workday, log off as Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe, and then immediately get back on our personal headsets to coordinate. Our little command center was running on caffeine and pure frustration. The breaking point came about a month into the project. We had a major deadline for the first functional prototype. We were supposed to present it to the CEO at the end of the week. Hank had built the core of the new system, but he needed the user interface components from another developer. Let's call her Karen. Karen was one of Amalia's prize hires. She was very active in the Women in Tech social channels and always talked a big game, but her actual work was abysmal. She had been assigned the UI components 2 weeks prior. Every day I would ask her for a status update. Every day she'd say it was almost done, and she was just adding the finishing touches. The day before the deadline, she finally submitted her work. Hank pulled it into the main project build, and the entire system crashed. It didn't just fail, it was a catastrophic failure. Hank spent the next hour digging through her code, and he was getting angrier and angrier. He called Jaden and me over to his desk. He showed us the code. She had apparently copied and pasted a bunch of code from an old, deprecated library that was completely incompatible with the new system. It was a rookie mistake, something a first-year intern would be embarrassed by. But it got worse. Hank discovered she hadn't built the components herself at all. She had outsourced the work to some freelancer on a gig website. He found the freelancer's name in the comments of the code. She had taken the company's proprietary information, sent it to a random person online, and then tried to pass off their broken work as her own. It was a massive security breach and a complete failure of her duties. We were in crisis mode. Hank basically had to scrap everything she'd done and rebuild the entire UI from scratch. He worked through the night for 20 hours straight. Jaden and I stayed with him, feeding him coffee and helping with the minor stuff. Somehow, he managed to pull it off. He finished the new UI an hour before the presentation to the CEO. The demo went perfectly. The CEO was thrilled. He praised Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe for our incredible work. We were exhausted, but relieved. We had averted disaster. After the meeting, I, as Ashley, wrote a formal report. I detailed the incident with Karen, focusing on the facts, the missed deadlines, the broken code, and the critical security breach. I recommended that she be removed from the project immediately. I sent the report to Amalia. I expected her to be shocked, angry even. Her response left me speechless. She called an emergency meeting, just me and her. She looked disappointed, not in Karen, in me. She told me that my report was overly harsh and not collaborative. She said that we need to understand that women in tech face unique pressures and that we should be building each other up, not tearing each other down. I tried to explain the severity of the situation, the security risk, the fact that we almost missed the CEO deadline. She waved it away. She told me that Karen was feeling intimidated by the high-pressure environment we had created. Then she delivered the final blow. She said that, to foster a more inclusive and supportive leadership dynamic, she was promoting Karen. She was making Karen a co-lead on the project, alongside me. She wanted me to mentor her, to help her grow into the role. I just stared at my screen, at the filtered face of Ashley, completely numb. Amalia was promoting the most incompetent person on the team, who had just committed a fireable offense, to a leadership position on the most important project in the company. Her reasoning was pure ideology. She saw a woman who was struggling and decided the solution was to give her more power, regardless of her ability. She was going to sink the entire project, and possibly the company, just to prove a point. After the call ended, I took my headset off. I looked at Hank and Jaden. "It's time," I said. "Burn it all down." There was no more debate. Amalia had made our decision for us. Hank had been preparing for this moment. He had a folder on his secure server. It contained everything. Every recorded meeting with Amalia's bias statements. Every chat log of her praising us while dismissing male candidates. A detailed performance report comparing our productivity as Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe to the rest of the team. The numbers were staggering. The three of us were outproducing the other 10 members of the team combined. A copy of Karen's outsourced broken code. And, the cherry on top, our original resumes. Truett, Hank, and Jaden, along with the generic rejection letters we had received from Amalia. It was a mountain of undeniable, professionally organized evidence. Hank put it all into a single, encrypted zip file. Jaden drafted the email. It was addressed directly to the CEO. No one else CC'd. The subject line was simple: confidential information regarding HR practices and project risk. The body of the email was short, professional, and devoid of emotion. It stated that we were employees who had discovered systemic discriminatory hiring practices orchestrated by the HR director, Amalia. It mentioned that these practices had resulted in the hiring of unqualified personnel, which now posed a direct and immediate threat to the success of the new flagship project. It concluded by saying, "The attached file contains all relevant documentation. We have chosen to bring this to you directly to mitigate further damage to the company. We created a temporary anonymous email address." We all gathered around Hank's computer. He attached the file. He moved the cursor over the send button. We looked at each other one last time, a silent agreement. He clicked it. For the next 24 hours, it was strangely quiet. Nothing happened. Amalia was posting in the work channels as usual. We started to get nervous. Did the CEO not get the email? Did he dismiss it? Then, the next morning, things started happening. A company-wide calendar invitation for an emergency all-hands meeting appeared, scheduled for noon. Then, about an hour later, Amalia's Slack account was deactivated, just like that. She was gone. Her name was grayed out. A quiet murmur went through the work channels. People were confused. At noon, the entire company joined the video call. The CEO was there. He looked grim. He didn't waste any time. He announced that Amalia was no longer with the company, effective immediately. He said there would be a full, independent review of the HR department's hiring practices. He then talked about the flagship project. He said he had reviewed its status and was making some structural changes to ensure its success. The meeting was over in less than 10 minutes. It was a corporate bloodbath, executed with cold precision. An hour later, the three of us, Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe, got a single meeting invitation from the CEO for the following morning. The title was simply Discussion. That night, we barely slept. We had won, but the final chapter wasn't written yet. The next morning, we logged on from our command center for the last time. We joined the video call. It was just the CEO. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at our three female avatars on his screen. "Good morning," he said, his voice flat. "I received an anonymous email 2 days ago. It contained a great deal of illuminating information. I believe it came from one of you, or perhaps all of you." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Before we discuss the future of this project," he said, "I need to know who I'm really talking to." This was it. I took a deep breath. "Sir," I said, my modulated Ashley voice sounding strange in the tense silence, "we need to show you something." Hank counted down from 3 in our private chat. On 0, we all hit a single hotkey. The filters and the voice modulators shut off instantly. The faces of Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe vanished from the screen. They were replaced by us, 3 regular guys sitting at our desks in my apartment. The CEO's eyes widened, just for a second. It was the only crack in his professional poker face. He leaned back in his chair, staring at us. He wasn't angry. He looked fascinated, like a scientist who had just discovered a new species. "Well," he said after a long silence, "I can't say I expected that. I did the talking. I explained everything from the beginning. Our qualifications, the rejections, our suspicions, the experiment. I was factual and direct. No emotion. I just laid out the sequence of events that had led us to this moment." When I was done, the CEO was quiet for a full minute. He pulled up a file on his computer. We could see him looking at our real resumes, the ones we included in the evidence package. He looked at our faces, then back at his screen. Finally, he spoke. "What you did," he said slowly, "was unorthodox, deceptive, and grounds for immediate termination." My heart sank. "However," he continued, leaning forward, "you also saved this company from a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. You exposed a critical vulnerability in our operations, and, in the past 3 months, you have done more productive work than the entire department combined." He looked straight at us. "I don't care about office politics. I don't care about ideology. I care about results, and you 3 deliver results." He made us an offer. He would terminate the contracts for Ashley, Brenda, and Chloe, and he would hire Truett, Hank, and Jaden, with a salary increase. He wanted us to lead the project. For real this time. He ended the call by saying, "Welcome to the company, again." We logged off. The 3 of us just sat there, in the quiet of the room. It was over. We hadn't just gotten jobs. We had been told the system was rigged. We had refused to accept it. We had fought back with the only tools we had, our skills and our wits. And we had been proven right. It wasn't about being a man or a woman. It was about being competent. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.